Hello, my name is Michael O'Keefe, aka The Movie Wizard. If you enjoy this interview and want to hear more top-notch film industry conversations, please press the thumbs up, subscribe to this channel, and hit the bell to stay in the know. Hello, Troy Howarth. We're going to talk today about The Irishman, and I know you are someone who likes to rank things. So tell me, as far as Robert De Niro and Martin Scorsese collaborations go, where does this one rank?
Oh boy. In terms of their collaborations, that's a good question. It's pretty high. I suppose my favorite of their films together is Taxi Driver, and then Raging Bull, then Goodfellas, then probably this.
Wow. So you like it more than Casino?
Yeah, I like Casino a lot, although I like it probably less than the other mob movies. I find it a little unfocused compared to the other ones, although it's wonderful, it's brilliant in many respects. But I think I don't know, to me it feels a little bit more sort of rambling, whereas the other ones are a little more focused, I think.
Okay. I duly noted, and it's definitely better than New York, New York. I'll give you that.
Yeah, New York has got to be the bottom one there. Although again, it's not complete. I don't think any of Scorsese's films are without interest,
Hmm.
but that's certainly one of the ones I revisit less.
And do you like Cape Fear, King of Comedy?
Oh, I love King of Comedy, and King of Comedy is absolutely fantastic. Cape Fear, I like. I think two-thirds of it is really terrific. I think the last act it kind of goes off the rails. I suspect he was eager to kind of try something that was a little more kind of commercial and a little more of a genre piece, and he went whole hog on that, and I give him a lot of credit for it because again, I think it's quite good, but that last act to me is just too much.
It's a little hard to believe.
Well, as soon as we see De Niro strapped under the car,
Right.
which I understand the idea behind it, and I get the idea behind it. That sort of relentlessness, nothing will stop him, but
Hmm.
that kind of gets you into it. And then there's a moment which is it's meant to be funny, and I guess in a way it is, but it just feels wrong. It's when Jessica Lange scalds him with the coffee, and he says, "Are you offering me something hot?" it it's amusing, but it kind of, I don't know. Up until that point, I felt like, although it's very stylized and very baroque, it felt believable. Whereas that last act to me was just too much.
Okay. So when we started talking about The Irishman, you told me that you think it is a masterpiece. So what are the primary reasons for that?
It's tough. I mean, it's a long film. It's got so much in it. But I think what I really like about it is it feels like that's the final statement on that particular type of film for Scorsese. And although I would obviously not be angry if he
Mhm.
did another mob themed film after this, I really don't think he needs to. I feel like this is kind of, this is taking about as far as you can get. I think it has a really super focused kind of emotional quality to it, and it's a very sad elegiac film that I find deeply moving. And also for a movie that took a certain amount of heat from some people, I think ridiculously so because of the length. It's never ever boring. I mean, to me, it just grabs me right from the get go, and to me, it offers up everything I could possibly want, not just out of a Scorsese film, but any film in general. It's just my mind never wanders when that film is on, and everything about it I think just clicks. The style of it, the performances, the story, the attention to detail, just the entire way that it's told and it unfolds. It's just an absolutely sure-footed and completely engrossing film.
All right. Well, there it is. You laid it out there. I personally love Joe Pesci's performance in the movie as
Mhm.
compared to Goodfellas and Casino. He's much more drawn back, and I thought that was very effective. What are your thoughts on his acting here?
I think that was the thing that ultimately appealed to him about doing it because, as you know, it took a lot of convincing to get him to do the film. Has been retired for some time. I think there might be something I'm forgetting, but I think the last piece of acting he did was for De Niro in what was that? The Good
Good
Shepherd.
Shepherd. Yeah.
Yeah, he had a little role in that, and I don't think he'd done anything since then. I mean, he's just quite content being retired and playing golf and doing doing his thing. And I think it was absolutely masterstroke to get him, being known so much for having played Tommy in Goodfellas and for playing Nicky in Casino. And of course, not to forget his role as Jake's brother in Raging Bull as well. But playing these kinds of really extravagant, ebullient, short-tempered, loudmouth little guys. To have him come back and play a character that's so completely in control, he never has to raise his voice. There are so many moments in the film where you're waiting for that to happen, which I think is really brilliant. That's something that, if you're familiar with the legacy of these films and of these guys working together, you're waiting for it. You're waiting for it in various different scenes that he's going to explode, and he never does. And I think that makes him particularly effective.
I agree 100%. The original music really worked for me as well in the movie. What do you think about Robbie Robertson's work provided for the film?
Yeah, there's relatively little original, but that theme that he came up with, it's almost kind of a Morricone type of piece with the harmonica. Very effective, again, very sort of somber and relentless, and it perfectly underlines the emotion of the piece. And also, and Scorsese has always been fantastic, go all the way back to particularly to Mean Streets, for example. I mean, as soon as Harvey Keitel puts his head down on a pillow and Be My Baby kicks in, it's impossible to hear that song without thinking of that opening montage. He's always used music beautifully, and he does here really the whole way through. I think the entire soundtrack is really terrific.
Yeah, I'm a big fan of that theme. I like to put it on when I want to think hard about something.
Yes, no, it's very good, and it was released in advance of the film. You could hear the piece of music before the film actually became available, I believe, and or certainly at least I heard it before I saw the film, and I thought it was terrific. I mean, again, it's not something that Scorsese tends to use a lot of original music in his films. He likes to have that kind of mix and match of kind of rock and roll and various different types of songs and music, even opera and classical music. But whenever he does commission original music, I think it's always very effective. But this piece in particular, I think, is very, very good.
So the movie is not as visceral as Goodfellas or more recently The Wolf of Wall Street, but more introspective. One movie I would compare it to is Ran by Akira Kurosawa, and certainly Silence within Scorsese's body of work. What do you think the role of Scorsese's age played in the movie?
Well, not to sound pejorative about it, because it's not meant that way, but it's very much an old man's film. It has to be. I mean, it's all about introspection and sort of looking back on a life that has been poorly lived. This idea of this guy who's not a bad guy at the beginning. He's driving a truck, and he's minding his own business, and he's not involved in anything that's too outrageous, and then gradually kind of gets himself into this world. And I don't think that's something that a young man could do. Certainly Scorsese, when he started out with Mean Streets, he wouldn't have been able to relate to something like that. And I think even back in the 90s, doing films like Goodfellas and Casino, I don't think he would have had that in him at that time. I think that's something that comes with age, and that comes with the thing that we all do as we get older. We start to reflect back on our lives, and we start to think about the choices that we've made that brought us to where we are, the regrets and so forth. I mean, sure, we all have things that we've done that we regret. And I think that's an extremely important theme that runs throughout the film, and in particular into the last act of the movie, which I was amazed to see some people didn't like. But I think you couldn't not have that last act of the film and still have this same particular kind of emotional impact that this movie packs.
And do you like Ran?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I mean, again, it's that theme again of just sort of looking inward and really looking back over your life and thinking about mistakes and thinking about the good times and the bad times. And I think it's something that I think, especially as you get older, maybe it's something that is more appealing about the film to people of a certain age, as opposed to young people who maybe would go into it looking for something more visceral, like, The Departed, for example, and you might be disappointed on that level.
Yeah, I think some people were disappointed. I think I was disappointed too, but after watching it now 3 times, I respect it more for what it is than what I wanted to impose onto it, like a Goodfellas 2 or Casino 2.
No, I loved it from the first viewing. I was super excited about it as soon as they've been talking about doing a film of it all the way since the book came out in 2004, and they started developing it, years before it happened. So it was one of those films for him that was sort of a passion project, like Last Temptation of Christ, Silence, Gangs of New York, films that he kind of had to marinate over for a very long time before he had an opportunity to make them. And I think in this case, it's probably good that it came when it did, because again, I think it gave him a greater insight, I think, into what really makes this film interesting, as opposed to just the typical kind of mob movie kind of tropes.
Yeah. Okay. So what did you think about the flashback structure of the movie? And what do you think the themes are of the script?
Well, I mean, themes we're talking about already, just the whole idea of regret, looking back over the past, looking inward, looking for some kind of redemption, and ultimately not really finding it. That a life lived in a certain way isn't ultimately going to be deserving of forgiveness in the long run. I mean, Frank's final fate in many respects is more kind of sad and in a way sort of horrifying than what happens to a lot of the mobsters in his earlier films. I mean, he's brought down by old age, he's brought down by a trip to the bathroom in the middle of the night, and having dealt with elderly parents with health issues and so forth. I mean, that's absolutely accurate. I mean, it's just mundane things that people who once upon a time were kind of almost superhuman and untouchable, something just as mundane as a trip to the bathroom in the middle of the night is what's ultimately going to put you into a nursing home. So that's certainly very much a heavy theme that's throughout the film. And I think structurally, the use of the flashbacks and so forth, I think that totally plays into that, because again, it's this idea of Frank Sheeran looking back over his life, talking about things that he's been through. And it's the notion of the unreliable narrator too. I mean, we can't necessarily take everything that he says at face value. And indeed, that was discussed later, as there's been a lot of doubt being cast on the validity of his statements. Is it entirely true what he said? Is his account of what happened to Jimmy Hoffa accurate? We don't know. Obviously that is still technically unsolved. So we've only got his word to go for. So I think that's very important in terms of the flashback structure as well, because in a way it kind of, I think it saves the film from any kind of criticism of, well, of course it's not accurate. Well, no, it's not necessarily accurate in any sense other than the fact it's an accurate representation of what he claimed actually happened.
Yeah, I like that sort of melancholic note. Like I swear I killed Jimmy Hoffa, and like we still don't know that per fact, but I think it has to do something. It plays into the role of myth in the gangster legacy of Scorsese. Like we know, Henry Hill had sworn FBI testimony that led to Goodfellas, so it had to be 100% authentic and accurate. While this is totally different,
right? Absolutely. And it's the same thing with Casino as well. I mean, again, that's that sort of, mixture of fact and fiction, conflating different things and taking real people and spinning them off into something that's slightly stylized, but still, in many respects, I mean, it really was kind of outrageous as all that.
Yeah, I also like when they say how the people would die, like they would be introduced, and then there'd be a little text saying how they would get killed. That sort of reminded me of Kenji Fukasaku's Yakuza Papers.
Yeah, and again, that kind of it's just underlining right away, no matter how glamorous things may appear, no matter how well people appear to be doing, this is what's going to happen to them. And I think that's something that a lot of people have misunderstood about his mob films down through the years. They've been criticized sometimes for kind of glamorizing things. Well, you have to show it for what it is. You have to show people why it is that people get involved. It's like with drugs or anything else. There is an appealing aspect to it. There is a fun part to it that people get mixed up in this stuff. But then from there, it's ultimately how things go downhill when all hell breaks loose, and things don't turn out the way that they want them to. So a lot of these, particularly young people who kind of take these movies and, they plaster their walls with the posters, and they want to try and emulate that lifestyle. It's funny to me because it's almost like they tuned out before the end. They don't
Right.
realize how badly these things are going to turn out.
Yeah, like how rappers love Scarface.
Yeah. And it's like they didn't see the ending. It's funny. I mean, but again, he would take criticism for that, particularly when Goodfellas came out. There was a lot of criticism of that. Oh, how could you be so irresponsible? Well, there's nothing irresponsible about that. You have to show it truthfully. I mean, this is why people do it. At the peak of things, it was a lot of fun. These people weren't getting up and clocking in, like a schmuck, as Henry Hill said.
Right.
They were in control of everything, and they had everything they wanted. And unfortunately, people get greedy, they get sloppy. Things will eventually fall apart, and that's exactly the point. So I don't think it's at all glamorizing. And it was the same thing was said about Wolf of Wall Street as well. Well, again, that's kind of the white collar Goodfellas in a way.
Yeah.
Because you're dealing with people who, again, at the peak of it, the excess, the drugs, the sex, the money, the tackiness and everything, that was completely, that's what it was all about. And that's why those people did what they did. But they too were brought down in the end. So you have to show both sides of it. And I think there's nothing wrong with that.
Yeah, back to the script. I love how they juggle the flashbacks. Like, he's in the nursing home, and then it's the lawn ride, and then he's going back and forth. So it's like a memory within a memory. And I'm sure, structuring that screenplay must have taken forever.
Yeah, well, they had a lot of time to work on it, obviously, which was a great help. And I mean, he's always enjoyed sort of playing around with that kind of structure anyway, including into the use of voiceovers and things like that. The way voiceovers will switch from one person to another, even into something really jarring, like in Casino, when Joe Pesci's having a voiceover, and then all of a sudden it cuts out because of what happens to him. So always kind of experimenting with that kind of structure, which I think makes things a lot more interesting than a straightforward kind of linear approach would make it.
Yeah, definitely. I also love when Frank Vincent gets like one line of voiceover too.
Yeah. It's always, they just, sort of kick in here and there. It's very sort of stream of consciousness, and it works. I mean, absolutely. I think he's a master of that aspect of it.
Even though it is a didactic question, it can still provide some sort of insight. Did you prefer Al Pacino's performance or Robert De Niro's?
Well, I mean, if I have to be honest, I'm a bigger Al Pacino fan than I am a De Niro fan, although I love them both. I love De Niro. I have a great deal of respect for the work that he's done, particularly with Scorsese. But Pacino is, to me, is the one who steals the film. I really, really love that performance because it's kind of playing with that larger than life quality that he's brought to a lot of things since Scarface.
Yeah.
If you look at the early Al Pacino versus the Al Pacino of later years, it's a stark contrast. They're very, very different. But it's not just loud and boisterous the whole way through. There's a lot of subtle moments too. And I think he's kind of the heart and soul of the film on a certain level, because he is he's sort of lovable, even though he's incredibly frustratingly stubborn, which of course is what ultimately brings him down. If he could have cooperated a little bit, if he wouldn't have been so in many respects sort of obnoxious about it, he wouldn't have brought that heat down on himself, and maybe things could have turned out different. I thought he totally deserved an Oscar for that film, and unfortunately he and Pesci were both nominated, but neither one of them won, which I thought was a terrible shame. Brad Pitt was fine. I thought he was very good, but I don't think he was as good as either of them. So, but that's just me. That being said, I thought De Niro's work in the film was in many respects very underrated. And I think a lot of that had to do with the fact that he's kind of a passive character, and he's required to keep a lot of it on the inside. He reacts more than he acts. And he's very much, somebody who carries a lot of pain and a lot of hurt in him without ever really vocalizing it. So a lot of it's kind of in the eyes, and a lot of it's in the body language and so forth. He's got to carry a 3.5-hour movie, and he does it beautifully. And I don't think that he quite got the praise for that he really deserved.
Interesting. Yeah, I enjoyed Al Pacino in Once Upon a Time in Hollywood too, even though he had a small role.
Yeah, no, he was. It was great to see him in two really fine films in that year because it's a kind of a pity he's shown up in not always movies that are worthy of his talents, although he always seems to be enjoying himself. So there's something to be said for that.
Yeah, yeah. I guess at a certain point, the lifestyle sort of takes over. This and like they've already done great work, and that.
Well, you don't have anything to prove after a certain point. I mean, you could
Right.
say the same thing for De Niro, that the
Yeah.
21st century hasn't been as stellar in terms of the quality of films that he's doing. But I mean, he doesn't have to anything to prove either. I mean, he's been doing all that remarkable work through the 70s, 80s, and 90s. So
Mhm.
I don't necessarily blame people for after a certain point doing a certain amount of paycheck work. But the thing about Pacino is even in the films that I think are really, really not worthy of him at all, you always get a sense of a guy who still loves acting. He may go really over the top sometimes, but yeah, that's okay. I mean, it's kind of what's expected of him.
Yeah, he's fun, and you're right. He really is the heart of the movie. I love his relationship with Frank's daughter, contrasted
Yeah.
with how Pesci deals with her, and how she just does not like him whatsoever. Is really
No.
repelled by him because of his like low key killer vibes. And then you got Jimmy Hoffa, who's got the heart of gold.
Yeah. Well, I mean, it's like Frank says in the voiceover. He didn't have a nickname like Whispers or Fat Tony or something like that. So kind of he was just kind of a normal guy by comparison. I mean, even her own relationship with her father, which there was, I think, a ridiculous controversy over the fact that Anna Paquin only had a couple of lines in the film, as though that was somehow sexist or something. These people didn't understand that it's absolutely vital that she is so silent, that she's there on the sidelines, she's watching, she's observing, she's taking it in, but she is silent, and after a certain point refuses to speak with him. So that's extremely important.
Yeah, yeah. I do think people make a little bit too much of that in mob movies.
Well, and it's not even. I mean, again, you never know what people, what sort of slant people are going to use to try to criticize things or whatever. But
Mhm.
I think Scorsese's always had very interesting female characters in his films. There's a lot of great, women characters, and certainly actresses, some of whom have given best performances of their careers under his direction. Some pretty extraordinary, complex, multi-layered women characters in his films. So I think Anna Paquin's actually quite good, with what she's got to do. And
Mhm.
I think that's a very deliberate thing, and it's not a question of, well, this is just a man's world. We don't care about the women. The women all kind of have their moments, but yeah, it is. It is also very much a male-driven film in a certain sense. But that's not to say that the actresses don't have their moments to shine as well.
Okay, duly noted. So yeah, I'm sort of interested in the fact that that Robert De Niro doesn't do theater. Like we know Al Pacino does theater. De Niro doesn't do theater. If you could ask Robert De Niro one question about his acting technique, what would you ask him?
Oh, that's a tough one. I guess my big question would be what is the appeal to any given project? What is is it the quality of the character? Is it the quality of the writing? Is it the collaborators? What is it in particular that draws him to do a particular project?
Yeah, that's good stuff. Are you excited for Killers of the Flower Moon?
Oh, yes, yes, very much so. Obviously another big film, large budget. It's kind of a Western, apparently. He's never done one, so that'll be
Mhm.
interesting to see. The cast that he's put together for it is really interesting, and the subject matter, what I know of it. I've not actually read the book.
Yeah.
I read Shutter Island before I saw the film, and although, uh, I mean, I like that film a lot. I think it's really terrific and very underrated, but
Yeah.
it's one of those things, you kind of you spoil all the surprises for yourself ahead of time. So I
Yeah, I know what
appreciate
you
that
mean.
on the level that I could see where he improved on it. And I think he did improve on the book in some respects. Um, but I kind of want to go into this one somewhat fresh. So I'm not going to read the book until afterwards. but yeah, I mean, it doesn't matter what it is. I mean, even something like Silence on the face of it is not really the kind of subject matter that would make me go, oh boy, I really got to see that.
Yeah.
I'm not a religious person. It's not something that really means anything to me. But
Mhm.
I watched the film again recently for the second time, and I think for what it is, it's a magnificent film. It's very deeply heartfelt, quite moving, and at times rather sort of shocking. But yeah, it doesn't matter what he does. And any film that he turns his hand to, I'm going to want to see it. It's just unfortunate the last two films I didn't get a chance to see in the theater, whereas the ones before it I did.
Yeah. Yeah. People didn't really like Silence. I actually met a producer of Silence once, and he said it was a great honor working with them, and we were disappointed.
Well, they're probably disappointed more than anything by the commercial response.
It was only commercial. It was just the commercial reason.
Yeah. And I don't know what people were thinking with that, because it's like, well, it was funny to me that Paramount was going to produce The Irishman until Silence flopped. How can you compare a 3-hour religious epic, that is going to be a really tough endurance test for a lot of people, to a kind of MVP package of the mob genre? They're completely different things. I mean, Silence was not a commercial project. I doubt very much that Scorsese undertook it thinking this was going to be box office gold.
Right.
So kind of like expecting Kundun to be a huge hit or something like that. Some of these things you do them just because it's, it means something to you and you hope people will connect to it. So no, I like Silence a lot, but it's not one of the ones that I, keep revisiting a ton. I've only seen it twice, like I said, but I think it's a very good film, and I'm glad he had a chance to finally make it.
Yeah. Who else is in the cast of Killers of the Flower Moon? Tell my audience.
Well, De Niro, of course, Leonardo DiCaprio. I think this is the first time that they'll be together in a movie since This Boy's Life, unless I'm mistaken, which is a movie I'm very fond of. And Jesse Plemons, I think is the actor's name, the young actor who played Jimmy Hoffa's stepson, or
that guy.
Yeah, and he was on Breaking Bad. He played Todd on Breaking Bad. He's kind of the lead, I guess. Originally, DiCaprio was going to play that role, but he elected to play a slightly smaller part, I guess. So it's basically going to be Jesse Plemons in the lead.
Oh.
But of course, it's being billed more as a sort of DiCaprio, De Niro thing, of course, because they're bigger names. I'm not sure who else is in it off the top of my head, but that's good enough right there.
There you go. I didn't know that about Jesse Clemons, and I actually do not like that guy very much. But that's just my personal gripe.
Well, I think he's a good actor. He played a really despicable character on Breaking Bad. If you've ever seen the show, his character was not a nice guy. I liked him a lot as Chucky. What was his name? Chucky in The Irishman. That whole scene with him and the fish.
The fish, yeah.
I forget what Pacino says. I can't remember him just saying about never put a fish in the backseat of your car. That'll be important in your life. Very funny stuff. But no, I like him. So I'll be curious to see how he does in a more prominent role like that.
Okay, well, we'll wait and see. Looking forward to that movie a lot as well. Troy, thanks a lot for your time. Thank you for talking to me about The Irishman. It was a lot of fun. My final question is, as a man who's written a fair amount of books, would you be interested in writing a book about mafia movies at some point?
Oh, I feel like that's been done to death. I would, of course, in theory, would be totally fine with it, but I feel like it's been covered pretty well. Same thing with Scorsese in general. I mean, Lord knows, I love his movies, and I have a lot to say about his films, and the good and the sometimes not so good, but generally, quite brilliant. But what can he write that hasn't been written before? So no, I'll leave that to others, I think.
Fair enough. But do you talk about Umberto Lenzi's crime movies in your book about him?
Oh, of course. Yeah. I'll be, going into all the films, the history of the films, and some critical observations as well. So yeah, they're all covered.
Well, there you go. There's something for people to look forward to. All right. Well, thanks a lot for your time.
Thank you for having me.